The headlines these days are dominated by incidents that happen in flight, as the post-pandemic period pushes a wider return to flying. Recently, a passenger was exposed to another passenger's smelly feet. 2 Air Canada passengers found their seats covered in vomit, and an Air France customer discovered excrement and blood on the floor in front of him. Then there's the well-known diarrhea flight, where a medical issue with one of the passengers made them sick throughout the cabin, necessitating an emergency landing by a Delta plane midway through its transatlantic flight. But mile-high icks are, in reality, nothing pro of air travel for decades. One of the worst happened on February 3, 1975. An in-flight meal tainted with staphylococci caused 197 passengers on a Japan Air Lines Boeing 747 traveling from Anchorage, Alaska to Copenhagen, Denmark, to become ill. This is the biggest food poisoning incidence in aviation history, with 124 cases of diarrhea and hospitalisations reported. What really happened? Let's find out in this video. The incident happened on a Boeing 747 that Japan Air Lines was flying. It is unknown what the aircraft's registration number is. Japan Airlines operated both the 747-100 and the 747-200B in their long-haul fleet at the time of the incident. There were 344 passengers on board the plane. Although the precise number of crew members is unknown, the fact that 364 meals were consumed on board suggests that there were 20 crew members on board. The majority of the passengers on the charter flight were Coca-Cola Company salespeople from Japan and their families who had won awards, including trips to Europe. The special flight took off from Tokyo Haneda Airport and stopped at Anchorage International Airport for fuel. The aircraft was to make a second fuel stop in Copenhagen Airport after crossing the Arctic before continuing on to Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, which was the flight's ultimate destination. After an uneventful trip, the aircraft entered European airspace 90 minutes before the Copenhagen landing was due. All of the food items were brought on board the airplane during the stop in Alaska. The flight attendants provided sandwiches, omelettes, and ham for breakfast. A little over an hour after breakfast, on approach to Copenhagen, 196 passengers and 1 flight crew experienced nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and cramping in their abdomens. 30 were in critical condition, and 144 were so sick that they had to be admitted to the hospital. The other 53 were treated in makeshift emergency rooms. The amount of passengers complaining about what appeared to be a similar situation overwhelmed the flight crew. The JAL flight appeared to be experiencing a widespread passenger vomiting incident, so airport officials had made plans before the plane even touched down in Copenhagen. When the plane reached Copenhagen, the affected travellers were taken to a private lounge that was ready for use, where a group of medical professionals who could not speak Japanese examined the patients. Japanese-speaking employees from Copenhagen restaurants were called to the hospital to serve as translators, because none of the country's doctors knew the language and very few of the passengers could speak Danish or English well. Tens of stretchers were laying everywhere, and patients were strewn all over the place as medical personnel attempted to transfer them to neighbouring hospitals. The lounge was filled with the smell of diarrhea and from faint to powerful moans. A little over 150 passengers were taken to nearby hospitals for medical attention. Luckily, the pilots on the flight had not expressed any desire to eat breakfast in a European time zone because they were still used to Alaskan time. Pilots were then required by Japan Airlines to eat distinct meals, a policy that is still strictly enforced by many international airlines today. Staphylococcus aureus was found in laboratory tests on passenger stool and vomit samples, as well as 33 samples of leftover gammon omelettes. The extraordinarily brief incubation period can be explained by the staphylococci's elevated toxin concentrations, which were also found in the ham. Tracking the infections back to their source, the inquiry concentrated on the International In-Flight Catering Facility, a Japan Airlines affiliate situated in Anchorage, where the meals were cooked. It was discovered that 3 cooks, one of whom had diseased lesions on his right index and middle finger, had made the meals. Staphylococci were discovered to be the cause of the sores on the cook's fingers. The cook was the source of the contamination, according to tests that showed the same phage kinds and antibiotic resistances in every sample. There were 4 galleys on the aircraft, and 354 meals were served out of them. 40 in first class and 108 in each galley on the main deck. Investigation claimed that the suspect cook had cooked food for 3 of the 4 galleys. Since he didn't think the lesions were serious, he had bandaged them without reporting them to his superior. Furthermore, although being obliged to do so, management had not confirmed that he was in good health. The suspect cook had made 72 of the 108 omelettes for one of the main deck galleys, and all 40 omelettes served in first class. Additionally, he created all 108 omelettes for another galley. Reports dispute as to whether he added the ham to these omelettes or if both cooks used the same container for the ham slices they cooked. That meant that he had handled 2 220 dinners in total. As per the hypothesis, meals served from one of the front galleys to 36 individuals and from the back galley to 108 individuals were deemed to be uncontaminated. Microbiologists claim that food poisoning can be caused by as low as 100 staphylococci. The logistics of in-flight cuisine created the perfect environment for the bacteria to proliferate and release toxins, which cause excruciating nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and cramping in the abdomen. The poisons did not evaporate when the omelettes were heated because they were heat-resistant. Before being served, the food was kept in the kitchen for 6 hours at room temperature, then for 14.5 hours in the refrigerator, but not cold enough at 10 degrees C or 50 degrees, and finally for 8 more hours in the aircraft ovens without refrigeration. The outbreak would not have happened if the food had been properly chilled from the time it was made until it was time to serve. According to Danish medical professionals, the majority of the sick passengers had been seated in the front part of the aircraft, which is in line with the omelettes' suspected distribution pattern. Those who had omelettes made by the suspect cook experienced an illness in 86% of cases, while no symptoms were observed in those who consumed one of the other omelettes. The captain and first officer had merely been lucky to have avoided eating any of the tainted omelettes because staff meal policies were non-existent on the airline. The pilots had chosen to have steak for dinner rather than omelettes because their biological clocks were set to Alaskan time instead than European. If they hadn't, they might not have been able to safely land the plane. Fortunately, the sick passengers, along with one member of the crew, all recovered. But at the time, several passengers' illnesses and the intensity of their symptoms were disastrous. After losing the capacity to speak or comprehend speech, one passenger experienced a partial and transient paralysis. But even though there was no deadly occurrence involving the people on board, the situation was nevertheless connected to a mortality. After discovering that one of his cooks was to blame for the incident, 52-year-old Kenji Kuwabara, the catering manager for Japan Air Lines, took his own life. He was the only person who died. According to the authorities, Kenji Kuwabara, 52, passed away in his Anchorage flat from a single self-inflicted gunshot. As vice president of international in-flight catering, he oversaw the Hawaii-based company's Anchorage office, which is owned 51% by Japan Air Lines. These days, it is rare to find a foodborne illness linked to plane travel. On the other hand, if it happens, there could be major consequences for the passengers and a risk to safety if it affects the crew. Proper food preparation and storage practices are essential for safe and high-quality in-flight catering. This holds true for the aircraft, the transportation vehicles that convey food from the ground to the aircraft, and the airport kitchens or subcontractors' facilities. In certain countries, this is very difficult. A number of various malfunctions in these systems have led to multiple foodborne outbreaks that the aviation industry has documented. As a result, contemporary practice has advanced to a point where it reduces the likelihood of failures of this nature. These have given us the chance to learn from our past errors. To avoid food illness outbreaks that could render the entire crew unable to work, crew members in the cockpit are served separate meals by different cooks. Many airlines have since adopted this policy. Furthermore, food should be maintained at temperatures low enough to prevent the spread of bacteria and handled with caution by those with infected areas. For more of our videos, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click the bell icon if you've subscribed to receive alerts when we release new videos. Thank you for watching.